Ready? Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. We're giving you the opportunity to get in, get situated and settled. Please grab snacks. We want everyone to be comfortable, hang out with us this evening. We're fun. So, yeah, we'll just give it maybe 2 minutes before we get going. I see the numbers are climbing, so want to give everyone time. Okay, one more minute. Toy Thibodeau said, because you know we all gonna be late. This is fact. This is why we are waiting and extending grace for all our folks who want to join in. Okay, we have 63 folks in the room. We'll wait one more second and we'll get going. All right, we ready to roll? Panelists, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to roll. Okay, thank you. Greetings, friends and families. I'm Dr. Ashley Bennett, co-leader of Accept. On behalf of Accept, Admissions Community Cultivating Equity and Peace today, I'm excited to welcome you all to the third session in the Being Black in College webinar series, Imposter Syndrome. To provide a bit of context, I want to share how we got here. After the deaths of Atiana Jefferson, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and too many other Black individuals to name, we wanted to offer something specific to Black students. As Blackness in America is under attack, we believe that Black students may question their value, their worth, and their right to show up in spaces that were not created for them, but are continuously enhanced by their presence. While we know we can't scratch the surface in an hour, we hope what you experience here today sparks conversation in your homes, in your schools, and ultimately in your lives. With that, I ask tonight's panelists to share who they are, where they work, and why today's topic speaks to them.
Okay, hi, my name is Sophia. I'm originally from New York. I have a background in education, working in Brooklyn and the South Bronx as a humanities teacher. And since then, I've transitioned to working internationally. I currently have a private consulting and coaching agency called Flip Consulting. It's Futures Literate Youth and Professionals. We focus on helping university-bound students and professionals plan their transitions into the higher ed space as well as into other positions. So I'm currently based in Bali, Indonesia, and I work remotely, and I'm super happy to be here. This topic speaks to me very personally. I'll be telling you a little bit more about my experiences with imposter syndrome, but given where we are and where I am today, it's certainly manageable. And I commend you for showing up for this, because this is a difficult topic that's only gaining more exposure and being talked about in public forums. So welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hi friends, my name is Kayla Stores. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I currently serve as the Assistant Director for Diversity Enrichment Programs at the University of Oklahoma, but we'll soon be transitioning into a role as the Director of Equity and Inclusion for Brebeuf Jesuit College Preparatory High School, which I'm super excited about. But I am excited to be hanging out with you all today because not only have I experienced impostership syndrome and continue to experience impostership syndrome, but I work with a lot of students who also experience some of the exact same things, and a lot of times don't realize that that's what it is. They don't recognize that this is a phenomenon that can actually be, managed and combated. And so not only continuing to learn and grow myself and figuring out how I best evolve with my own impostership syndrome, but being able to equip prospective students and current students with the skills to do the same.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Diane Graves. I'm a faculty member and child clinical psychologist. I currently teach at Hood College, which is in Frederick, Maryland. This is a topic I think all of us on the panel have already remarked is near and dear to our hearts, things that we have wrestled with, not only having gone to an Ivy League institution, but also for my PhD and now as a faculty member at a variety of different kinds of schools. It's definitely something that that we've all been challenged to face, and still to this day have to take an active role in reminding ourselves that we belong. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So we'll go ahead and get started with imposter syndrome. The chat feature will be open for the entirety of the webinar, so feel free to talk with each other. If you'd like to talk to the whole community, be sure to select panelists and attendee. That way everyone can see your comment. And if you have a comment just for the panelists, you can choose to select just panelists. So there's that. Also, the Q&A box, we're using that as a feature for more pointed questions that you would like us to answer on air, because it's very difficult to keep up with things in the chat. So if you could send all of your questions to the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to either answer them myself while the panelists are speaking, or give them an opportunity to answer live on the air. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and get started. And I would like to direct this first question to Sophia. Sophia, could you please define imposter syndrome and its causes? How can you determine if you have it, and to what extent?
So imposter syndrome is a phenomenon that was first really studied in the 70s by Dr. Pauline Clance and an associate Dr. Amimes. It's described as a phenomenon in which you're unable to internalize your achievements, and you have this feeling of fraud in which basically you are just thinking that your successes are a result of luck and everything's a fluke. So many people we know have imposter syndrome. Serena Williams has suffered from imposter syndrome and continues so. Even Maya Angelou once said when she was doing a Barack Obama speech that she's written 11 books, and each time she thinks, uh-oh, they're gonna find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're gonna find me out. So this is really not uncommon. In the beginning, the focus was really on women and how women in certain spaces, particularly academic and professional spaces, it was quite prevalent among them. But since then, it's been found that about 70% of people will have at least one episode in their lifetime, and it affects men and women equally. We also know that it might affect certain identity groups a bit more persistently than others. So this can occur in different settings, such as a new environment, in an academic setting, and in the workplace, and in different social interactions. And there are really 5 types of imposter. So there's the expert, who will basically have to be an expert in everything they do, and they are only really feeling satisfied when they finish the task with knowing absolutely everything about the task, right? And then there's the perfectionist, that's type 2, that's me. So this is a person who's like never quite satisfied with the product and can focus on shortcomings more than focusing on what was achieved. And there's a lot of anxiety, doubt, and worry about your activities. Then there's also the natural genius. And the natural genius is someone who is quite gifted and they're able to master a new skill quickly, but they feel ashamed when they can't do this because they're so used to success. So they fail to realize that all of us need to work on building our skills throughout life. The 4th type is the soloist. So the soloist is like somebody who feels like they're the only ones that can get the job done right. And they prefer to work alone, and they usually turn down help so that they can prove their worth as an individual. And then finally, there's the superhero, which some days it feels like we all have to be. And this is somebody who's typically a workaholic, and they have their hands in so many pots and are just trying to do the most, right? So how do you know if you have imposter syndrome? As mentioned before, about 70% of people experience at least one episode. So it's really about the extent to which you experience it. There is an official assessment, which is it's available free online. It's the Clance Imposter Syndrome assessment. So you can take that, but also just some things to look out for are you feeling feelings of inadequacy in certain spaces, or like you're not worthy of being in certain spaces? And are you questioning your achievements despite there being ample concrete evidence of your doing well, such as your grades are fine, your standardized test scores are fine, you're achieving lots in your life, but you're having a difficult time feeling really accomplished and like you're worthy of the accolades that you're getting. Somebody could tell you did a great job and it could be externally validated, but inside you don't feel particularly successful. And I would say, to what extent, if this is every once in a while, it's totally common for it to be every once in a while. But if it's to the extent that it's really starting to cause prevalent feelings of anxiety, depression, low self-esteem and confidence, and it's interfering with your ability to meet your responsibilities and get your work done, it's something that you should always talk to somebody to, but it's a bit more urgent if you're unable to meet your responsibilities at school or at work. I'll turn it over to anybody else who wants to add anything to that.
Well, thank you so much for that really robust explanation. That's why we don't have anything to add. It was awesome. So my next question goes to Kayla. Could you describe your first experience with imposter syndrome and how it made you feel?
Oh, okay. I remember it like it was yesterday. That's how it was. It was my senior year of college, and it's interesting. I was a McNair scholar, and my McNair advisor had previously informed us as a McNair cohort about imposter syndrome. She gave us the signs, she told us what to look for, and let us know that, hey, at some point, you will more than likely experience this. Whenever you do, I want you to know the signs so that you could recognize that that's what it is and don't allow yourself to like feed into the negativity. And so I was aware of what it was, but it wasn't until my senior year. It was spring break. So I drove home for spring break, hung out with my mom, back to Amarillo, Texas. And at that point, I had submitted 12 grad school applications, had been accepted to 8 of them, was fully funded for 4 of those 8, and was set and ready to go. All I had to do was choose where you're going to spend your graduate, your graduate experience. Go home for spring break. The week comes to an end. It's Saturday, and usually I would leave. I would get back on the road for the 4-hour drive. Sunday morning, right after church. Sunday comes and I'm just not feeling it. So I decide that I'm going to stay another day. I don't think anything of it. I call in and I get someone to cover my shift at work the next day. And I'm totally fine. Monday comes. I just don't feel it. I find myself wondering how I got here. I'm 2.5 months, not even, at that point it was probably like 6 weeks. I'm 6 weeks away from graduating with 2 degrees and transitioning to grad school, and it just wasn't there. And I couldn't figure out how I got there. I wasn't sure I was supposed to be there. I was just completely overwhelmed with this sense of like, this is just not real. You're so close, but it's like, when something is so close, it's almost like too good to be true that you tell yourself that it's just not it. That's exactly where I was at. I stayed home for another week. And my mom, who is so she didn't go to college. I'm the proud product of a first generation household. And so mom was always there to kind of support, and she never had to push me back to school because I was always super excited to head back to school, but she could tell that something was off here. So she gave me my space for the first couple of days and was like, hey, are you good? Come Friday, it had been an entire week. I had pushed off my shifts. I had pushed off my schoolwork and was just home. It wasn't even like I was doing anything. I wasn't hanging out with friends. I wasn't, roaming the streets. I was just home. I just couldn't bring myself to put myself in my car and drive back to OU to finish off those last 6 weeks and get that degree. And finally my mom, she was like, hey, baby girl, I don't know what's going on, but this is not it, and this is not you. So I'm going to need you to get your butt in that car and go back to school because you're so close. And I fought with her about it, and I cried. And I could not explain why, but there's just, Mom, I just can't. I just don't. I don't want to do it. And she literally had to pack up my car for me. She put me in my car. She filled my car up with gas, and she was like, all right, see you in May for graduation. And she made me drive back to school. And I just remember that 4-hour drive back, crying and trying to, figure out, how did I get here and what am I supposed to be doing? And I have all of these options, but I feel like I have no options. It was bad. I was very, very overwhelmed. But got back to campus. And once I was like physically back on campus, it took me about a day or two to get back in the swing of things, but scheduled a meeting with Sophia Morin. She was my McNair advisor at the time. And we sat down and I was like, this is what it was. She was like, yeah, that's exactly what it was. And we kind of talked through some of those things, and shout out to her. She was there to she boosted me all the way up and poured all the way into me and gave me all of the affirmation that I needed to really fire through to graduation. Walked across the stage and got 2 degrees in May, and it was literally one of the best things ever. But 6 weeks beforehand, wasn't quite sure I was going to make it and had absolutely no explanation as to why. I just wasn't sure I was supposed to be there. Yeah, I remember it and the feelings literally like it was yesterday. And I won't dive too much into, you asked for the first case of like impostership syndrome. I'm 28 years old, transitioning into a new role, and I'm still experiencing impostership syndrome at times. So it just kind of goes to show that it's definitely a thing, and it continues to manifest in different ways as we grow and as we evolve. But that was my first main experience with impostership syndrome.
Sophia or Diane, please feel free to jump in.
Great, Kayla, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a very powerful testimony to someone who looks like they have it all together, but is really struggling inside. So I thank you for being vulnerable to everyone and sharing your story. When you hear people talking about having experienced, this imposter phenomenon, it brings up memories when you've had very similar kinds of experiences. And that's why this particular forum is so valuable. And I'm so pleased to be a part of it. The more we can talk about that this is a normal thing that many people feel, and that there are things you can do to feel better. And there are things that we can do as parents and as community members and as mentors to help. You just heard Kayla tell us how important a mentor was in the right place at the right time, and how important a mother was at the right place at the right time, to help continue encouraging young folks to make it through when things are really hard. So again, thank you for sharing your story. I'm much older than you, but I remember my freshman hallway. I'm 3,000 miles away from home. I'm from Southern California originally. And I remember going to Brown and being in that freshman hallway, and everyone starts talking about, oh, I, solved world hunger. Oh, I, had this, I was on, Wall Street. And I'm just thinking like, I was in the Key Club, and really wondering like, what am I doing with these people? They're all doing such amazing things. And it took probably about 3 months of all of us being completely freaked out of each other before we started being more honest and authentic and saying, you guys intimidate the heck out of me. You're doing Key Club stand up. You guys intimidate the heck out of me. And it turns out we were all feeling very similarly, like we all were just intimidating each other and not realizing that we all absolutely belonged. We all absolutely had all of the raw materials to be incredible students at that school. But those first few months were really overwhelming, and I think contributed to a lot of us having some bumpy times, feeling, homesick, and wondering if we'd made the right decision, because everyone around us seemed so amazing, and yet we didn't realize we seemed so amazing to everybody else. So I think that's part of this sort of contagiousness of imposter syndrome, is it really spreads, right? And it takes somebody to have the courage to speak up about it before people can start realizing that they're not alone. right? It's really hard to get in other people's heads about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. One of the things that I can say also as a mom, I was very impressed with the principal at my daughter's middle school when she was there. They were teaching them all kinds of, study skills, right? And there are a number of the kids in this particular school that were pretty bright kids, and a number of families whose parents are well educated. And so they were kind of wondering why they were making their kids go through learning all these study skills that weren't necessarily working for them, because they, much like what you've heard Sophia mention, there are several different kinds of imposter syndrome, one of which is going to be the kids who things come easy to, right? And so we had a PTA meeting, and what the principal said was, well, here's the issue. These kids are pretty smart and they're getting away with stuff right now, but there's going to come a point in time where they're not going to do that anymore. And as a college professor, I see students hitting that wall on a regular basis in like freshman and sophomore courses. Things that they were able to do without actually working that hard. I mean, they worked, but not that hard. And they were able to get by and actually sometimes thrive and even do something last minute. And all of a sudden they, are still getting an incredible grade on something. They're going to hit someone like me in college, and all of a sudden, I'm going to have a certain expectation that they're going to be able to study, not just do the homework, but be able to study. And it's a skill that many of them haven't learned. And they get that first C or D on a grade. Some of you guys have hit it already in middle school and high school. You get that first C next to your name. You get that first D next to your name. And it's like a panic identity moment of, oh my gosh, I'm stupid. Oh my gosh, I'll never make it. What was I thinking? And it is a real moment for many folks. And I think one of the things that this principal was saying is that he would rather have people have that moment and then be able to pull out of the recesses of their experience some study skills that they can then try. Because he says it's likely you're going to go one of two ways. Either you're going to buckle down and actually start reading, because you can't play, you can't skate anymore. You're going to have to read. But you know how, you practiced it, or you're actually going to start really buying into that, drinking the Kool-Aid that you don't belong there and you're not smart and you're not going to make it, and you start checking out. And what he wanted was for all of our kids to not check out, to dig their heels in. You might have heard the term grit, just to hang in there when things get hard, and it's a process of learning. But I've got to tell you, this is a very real phenomenon that affects our kids. And again, I appreciate you sharing your story, Kayla. And I hope out there, if you're hearing us talk about how difficult things have been from time to time when we get around other people, or when we see that big letter grade on a test that doesn't reflect who we think of ourselves, just know that that's just a moment. And it's a moment you can either grow from, dig your heels in and be like, I'm going to make this happen. I got the goods. I can do this. Or you can choose to check out. And that's not what we want for any of you. We need you too much. Don't check out.
Sophia, you good?
Well, I'm realizing one of the causes that I forgot to mention, which is a super important one, is like early childhood and your familial environment. So I love that there's so many parents here, because it's so crucial that we're able to support each other and mentor your child through these kinds of things. So for me, I've done a lot of reflecting on this, and I'm the first American-born child of Haitian immigrants, and there's 5 of us. And my older siblings, we have a legacy in my hometown, all athletes, all high academically performing, and just well-behaved and everything like that. So, but in a Haitian household, like there was never really any pats on the back for doing what was expected of you. Like my parents are basically like, we didn't come to this country to work these jobs for you to go to school mess up. Like, what else are you gonna get than A's? So there was no acknowledgement. My sister was valedictorian, class president. So being compared to my sister, to the girl across the street, to the boy at church, like it was never like really acknowledged your achievements, but your smallest transgressions or the B or the C was like, well, what were you possibly doing? So this becomes internalized, and you're like seeking ways of validating your achievements, perhaps for me, for my family, and trying to find my own individual identity. And that's where you get this perfectionism from. So my first real experience that I can like really pinpoint as a really pivotal moment. I didn't know what it was called back then, but I ran track all of my life through middle school and high school. And I was quite successful. My parents never came to one of my track meets, but I heard that they would read the newspaper at work and my name was in there every Sunday and I was county champion, this and that, right? I even went to school on a full ride. There was one snowy winter day where there was the state championships in Syracuse, New York. And the number one girl, who's like slightly taller than me, slightly darker than me, born one day before me, she was my rival since we were like sixth grade, but she always won. She was just better. She went to University of Miami, all that. So I was always second behind her. And she wasn't coming to this track meet today, but there was another girl that was there that I had never beaten before. And I was just in my head like, oh my God, like she's here, she's jumped this, I've jumped that, like I'm never gonna be able to do this. And there was things going wrong in the track meet, like the officials were messing up, events were delayed because of the snowstorm. We didn't get on the runway to do our jumps until like midnight, right? So basically, my coach at the time, I basically had to grab me and just be like, yo, anybody can be beaten on any given day. So like, this is not about you necessarily. You need to show, you need to know that you've achieved X, Y, and Z over all these seasons. This is your senior year. This is your chance. Get it done. And that day I wound up going from crying somewhere in the corner because I thought I wasn't going to make the first round to the finals to actually winning a state championship in track and field. And that completely was a huge validation. I have a banner in my high school. Like that's something that nobody could ever take away from me. So when you're able to overcome these very acute episodes, or when you're able to find tools to manage it, you'll rack up those accolades and you'll be able to look back through your smile file, some people call it, and check yourself like, you know what, you absolutely did earn the right to be here. You have this list of accomplishments and you can reflect back on them.
Thank you so much. I will add that I benefited from attending schools, K through 12, that were pretty diverse, majority Black in a lot of cases. And it was very different for me to transition to the University of Oklahoma. And before classes even started, my roommate and I were accused of stealing from our suite mates because $10 came up missing. And then there was this whole thing. The RA had to get involved. Leadership on campus had to get involved. There was talk of moving us out to a dorm that's a little bit further away. For those of you who know OU, they were threatening to move us to Kate, which is, I saw Kayla's face, which is, it's not a bad dorm at all, but it was different than what I was experiencing in Walker Tower. And it got to the point where, and again, classes hadn't started yet. It got to the point where I thought, I should just go home. You know, I've been accused of stealing. All of these people have to now get involved, and I haven't even attended my first day of class. So what will the next 4 years look like? My mother, may she rest, said to me, you can come home if you want to. I'm not paying for it. And when you get here, you're going to work and pay bills, because your free ride, my dear, is over. And of course, in that moment, I was devastated. But what she was doing was making me stick it out. And as a result, I was able to connect, find my people. I was able to, you know, find my own little community. And that's the thing, everyone who's listening, community will save you in so many ways in college. And my community helped me grapple with imposter syndrome and realize that I had just as much a right to be there as any other student. And so I would just say I thank my mom posthumously. And then I thank the community that I was able to build for myself, because that really was a critical part of me getting over my syndrome and getting through. Okay, so the next question I have is, how do you show people you're qualified to exist in a space? And so for the sake of our conversation, how do we encourage students to show their colleagues, their peers, that they are qualified to be on that college campus? I'd like Sophia to tackle this question first.
So this can be kind of attributed to something very specific called the stereotype threat. And the stereotype threat is when in traditional spaces that have been built over time, you're made to feel because of your identity or some aspect of your identity that you're not equipped to do the job. So for example, this could be in STEM fields for women or in lots of other spaces for Black folks in general, right? So this was an interesting one for me because it's about, so how do you show you're qualified to be, and that's like proving to somebody else that you're qualified to be somewhere. And a combating imposter syndrome is it's first and foremost about changing your own thinking, right? Because there are going to be people that you're going to come across who are going to question your worthiness because they might think you got the job because of the color of your skin, affirmative action, or that you didn't have the grades, but some other thing was used to level the playing field. So my advice is really that you need to first practice just being able to understand that the qualifications of what you're there to do are not related to your skin color or to the way you look or to your gender identity, right? That's something that you need to very much internalize. One example I can give you is that I was working in Dubai for a few years at an international school, and the CEO of this school did not like the fact that I shaved my hair, right? So I shaved the sides and I still had some curly stuff on the top, and she had mentioned to my principal that this is not the haircut of a college and careers counselor. So thankfully I had some advocates for me who are just like, well, what does her hairdo have to do with her being qualified to do this job? She is well educated. She's internationally trained and certified, and she's here in Dubai, and she's had these results the previous year. So the hair coming off has suddenly qualifications from what she's proved before. So it didn't really make any sense that I had people to advocate for me. Unfortunately, that battle was lost because there are no equal opportunity rights in some countries. So I adopted the headscarf and, have about 20 head wraps and had a new accessory. But reminding people that certain attributes of the job are not related to your gender or to your race, first and foremost, is one way to combat being made to feel like you don't necessarily belong. And the other is finding someone to talk to about it for sure. You need someone either in the workspace or outside of the workspace who's going to understand what you're doing so that they can be an ally for you and also be a mentor for you, because you're probably likely not the first to have been subjected to this type of treatment.
Right. It's sometimes in some of my classes, I'll start off and say, we start talking about a humanistic approach to psychology. And one of those, the tenets is this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you might have heard about it, but it's basically where you start off meeting your basic physical needs and your safety needs. And eventually, if you have that set, you can start working on some higher order needs, like the need to belong, the need to be, connected to others, and ultimately to be your authentic self, right? So most of us are sort of stuck. A lot of us are stuck in this middle part of the pyramid where we're trying to belong. And so I introduce this lecture and I say, and I'll do this for everyone out there as well, how many of you absolutely know you cannot please everybody all of the time? How many of you just know this is true? Okay. How many of you keep trying anyway? And therein is the dilemma, right? You might know that and we're talking about how do you show people that you're qualified to be there? It doesn't matter what they think. It matters what you think, because you can't please these people. And some people may have it out for you for no other reason than the color of your skin, or that you took their job that they thought they should have, or whatever their drama is, but that's their drama. Whether or not you're qualified to be there is really coming from you. If you have the sense of I belong here, then no matter what other people will throw at you, you'll be able to maintain steadfast and be still in your space. But what that means, though, is you need to also recognize that no one is perfect, and you're gonna make some mistakes. And if you are so caught up in trying to prove yourself, then if you make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, when you do, you'll experience a tremendous amount of shame, right? And as if someone ever knew that you made these mistakes, it would just be proof that you didn't belong there. And do you see how that's all sort of you doing that to yourself? So the key thing is to recognize that there's no shame in making mistakes. And so one of the things that we can be teaching each other is that it's okay to make mistakes. They're learning opportunities. Nobody's perfect. Sometimes good enough is actually good enough, right? And that once you make a mistake, that's how we learn. You didn't learn to walk by not falling down, right? Everybody falls down sometimes. You can't please everybody all of the time. You decide first that you can be your authentic self and that you will try your best and that's enough. Perfection isn't on the table. Your personal best is what's on the table. And if you have that as your goal, then you won't start really worrying, how do you prove to other people that you belong there? Because you can't control their mind. You can't control their thoughts. You can control your own thoughts about yourself and about your worthiness to be in that space. And that, you give yourself permission to make mistakes and learn, because then you're actually going to be doing your job even better. So that's how I would address that.
I just want to say I love the sound of Dr. Graves's voice, and she's just the type of child psychologist, correctly? That yeah, I love it. I love it.
That's awfully, I'm loving this panel. You guys are great. I still think we should all take a trip out to visit Sophia, because that is a beautiful background.
Absolutely. As soon as Rona leaves us alone, I feel like we will all be somewhere else. I know I need to get up and go.
Yeah.
I did want to lift something Daynette Stewart said. And I'm not sure that there's an answer, but I just think it's a great question for conversation. So Daynette says, it's exhausting because we always have to prove that we deserve to be there. Why do we always have to prove ourselves? I believe this explains my determination in fighting through the stress and completing my degree on a large campus where we only represent 2% of the student body. And there's only a handful of us in the business program, highly nationally ranked program. So I think this just leads us to talk about, can we opt out? Do we opt out of proving? And do we just be? Do we just exist? As Black women, do you find that we are incapable of just being?
That's deep. That's a really deep point. I'll take a stab at it, but love to hear everybody's take on it. So I think there's a charge that we have as Black women in our community to do what we can to make things better for the next generation, right? And to do what we can to encourage and support each other. And I think, Michelle Obama's podcast is an example of that. I think, when you have an opportunity, if you can, to take it, to try to make things better. What happens for a lot of us on the job or in the classroom is that those were not necessarily spaces that were made for us. And we don't have the same amount of power in those spaces that many others might have. Let's just say at school, we've got Black kids that are getting suspended at higher rates. The punishments are much harsher for Black kids at school. So, there's these constant, what we sometimes call microaggressions that happen that chip away at your sense of belonging, almost as if you're going to be successful in that place, you have to deny part of who you are to be successful there, right? You have to wrap that headscarf around. You have, you've got to slowly quiet some of what makes you authentically you in order to navigate that space successfully. And I think for each person, there's a balance between how much of who I want to be do I need to negotiate to be as successful as possible in this space, because ultimately me being successful in this space means I can open up opportunities for change. And so sometimes you've got to go and just directly confront those issues when you have them. And it might mean that, yeah, maybe that's not the job for you. Maybe that's not the company for you. Maybe being those 2% at that school for some students, that's just not going to be enough. They need more of a community. Hats off to you for holding it down when there's just 2% Black students in this business program, because that's been a lonely road. And I can guarantee you on a regular basis, whether you are aware of it or not, people tried to undercut you, right? Whether it's a subtle thing a faculty member said, or the fact that your books never really mentioned Black businesses, or, you just have had to sort of buy into what that program was teaching as an education and make it work. And I applaud your determination. So some people have that as their calling and they can make it through that. If that's not you, if you need more of a community, or you need to be in a different space, or you can't see wearing that head wrap because it's just not going to work for you, that's okay too. I think we all have different lanes to travel on making things better. And so sometimes it's going to be working within the system to change it. Sometimes it's going to be directly protesting that because you just can't stomach it or tolerate it. And I think there's room for all of us. Like, we all are working towards the same end goal, and that is just peace and an opportunity to live our lives safely and healthily. So I don't know, I would pass it on to some of the other panelists.
So I will first, that was great. Thank you, Dr. Graves. You're awesome. From somewhat of a different perspective, for me, it has become a matter of, let me rewind. So, Black women, you asked about Black women, and can we just be? Can we just exist? And I genuinely believe that there is an inherent nurturing spirit about Black women. There's a resilience that, as much as we want to just be, I don't think it's in our natural blood to just be. If anything, it's a natural inclination to do the exact opposite. Where are we needed? How can we step in? What can I contribute? Or at least for me and a lot of the, predominantly Black female mentors that I have, it's just a natural sense of nurturing, and this is just kind of who we are. But in terms of proving ourselves, one thing that I found in my work is that I've stopped trying to prove myself to other people, because my work speaks for itself. So in the work that I do, I work with underrepresented students, and my one role coming into this office, hey, we are on a D1 campus. There's over 26,000 students on this campus. You are only one of them. And I know that in the larger spaces in this campus, every single day you are putting on a front, or you're code switching, or you are, turning it on whenever you step into this meeting. Whenever you walk into this office, I want you to be 100% authentically yourself. Take all of the masks and the facades and everything else that you have got going on. I want you to come in here and feel like every single aspect of who you are is seen, is affirmed, and is valued. And the only way that I can do that and facilitate an atmosphere of doing that is by being 100% authentically myself. It took some time in the workspace to get there, because I'm a lot. But as I started feeling a bit more comfortable in not code switching when I stepped into a room, or when I stepped into a meeting, or, really just getting I've got, style is a total thing. So being creative with my, with my outfits for work, and the conversations that I was having with other people, and bringing some new lingo into the office. And it just became a matter of me feeling comfortable being authentically myself, and knowing that my authenticity directly contributed to the work that I do. Because when students feel like they can authentically be themselves, that's when they want to be a part of something like this, which by default creates an atmosphere that, for us, we're looking to recruit and yield students. That's the work that we do to recruit and yield students. The base of it is be you. Students want to encounter real people, because by being authentically yourself, you by default give other people permission to do the exact same. Imagine an atmosphere where everyone feels so comfortable being themselves that you don't have to worry about what anyone else thinks about this side of you or that side of you or this marginalized identity. So I've learned to kind of walk in that, and I just don't feel the need to prove myself in this, that's the qualifier, in this professional space. Of course, as I transition, it's probably going to be a little different, getting my feet wet and, you know, allowing people to get to know me. But that's one of the things that I pride myself on, is making sure that, hey, what you see is exactly what you get. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to, turn it on and go with my telephone voice the first time I meet you. Like, you are going to get all of me from the jump, so that the more that you get to know me, you're not surprised or you're not caught off guard. I have found that for a lot of folks, that's intimidating. I get a lot like, okay, like, you were really intimidating when I first met you. And I think that that intimidation comes from really just being confident in myself. And so I say all of that to say, I think that we can still jump to things. We can still contribute. We can still find ways to insert ourselves in the work without feeling the need to prove ourselves, because when we're authentically ourselves, the work speaks for itself. And shout out to you for your resilience in that business program, because I can only imagine. But know that post-degree, when you were you're a bomb, and I don't want to make any assumptions. I can't remember if you didn't identify just in terms of your or your race and ethnicity, but you're a bomb woman who's going to go out and do great things in a field that needs more bomb women like you. So if anything, using, some of those marginalized identities and recognizing, hey, there's not enough of me, meaning that, like, I become even more important because to other folks, I represent this community. To other folks, I'm a representation of whatever community you come from. And when they see you in those positions, imagine the young little girls that are looking at you and seeing you, and they're like, man, I want to be that. Some of the things that we don't see sometimes in the midst of how did I end up here? But the direct implications of simply your existence in that space speaks for itself.
Woo. Take us to church, Kayla. I will add, and I'll drop a link in the chat when I get the opportunity. There's a book I read in my undergrad program by France Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask. And a concept that I lifted from that book that I've been able to really apply in my professional life since that point is the double consciousness. He describes it as the double consciousness of the Negro. So we now refer to it as code switching, but it's like Kayla and Diane just mentioned, sometimes you feel a need to have another face in order to assimilate, to be comfortable, to make people around you comfortable. But friends, it comes at a cost. It's a lot of mental brain power you have to spend adjusting yourself every time you walk into a new space, but also, as Kayla mentioned, they don't get the benefit of knowing you. And so we encourage you to show up, period. You show up with, if your hair is natural, if you wear head wraps, if you have a relaxed, whatever it is, you don't have to adjust yourself. They need to adjust to you, because I'm assuming I'm talking to a lot of Black students here. Unfortunately, we can't see your beautiful faces, but colleges benefit from you being on their campus, period. You'll hear them talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all that jazz, all those buzzwords, but not only do they benefit by being able to say we have X amount of students of color, they benefit because the campus is more rich. You bring not only your Black face, but you bring your culture, you bring your hometown, you bring your language. All of those things add so much value to college campuses. So as my friend Charles said a few minutes ago, if you are there, you belong there. Period, as the city girls say. So I'll move on to another question. Heather Pollock, she says, as a child, my parents, especially my mom, always encouraged us to say we were lucky for our good lives. Not necessarily that we had earned our successes, because that would be bragging. Do you believe that this is disproportionately drummed into girls who become women flirting with imposter syndrome?
I can take this as a psychologist. Yes, unfortunately. So there's one way to think about this as far as we call it attribution theory, right? So to what do you attribute this happening? Why did this happen the way that it did? And then we also compare that with whether something is stable or whether something is unstable. So let's say I got an A on a test, right? I can think that it's stable, like I'm just really smart, and no matter what the test is, I'm going to get an A. Or I can think it's unstable, like I got lucky on that particular test, right? And I can either make it about me or I can make it about the test. So maybe that test was just an easy test, or maybe I'm smart. Internal, I'm smart. External, that was an easy test. So we want to listen to, and one of the things we do as therapists is we listen to what are you attributing that A on the test? What we tend to see for most folks is a bias that if something good happens, I did it and it's stable. And if something bad happens, it was outside of me and it was temporary. And that's one way to protect ourselves and protect our self-esteem and keep trying. But what we hear when people are depressed is we hear them making, when something good happens, it's external, unstable. That's that example, I got lucky. So that you're not really owning what it took for you to get the A, which was you studied, you listened, you went to class, you read the book, and you have some natural aptitude towards test taking, and you did all of those things. So by teaching our children that when something good happens that you've been involved with, that it was external of you and unstable, then that robs that child of the opportunity to learn mastery. And also to start thinking very confidently about that their skill set that they take no matter where they go. So there are a couple of things that parents can do that would encourage kids to really struggle with some imposter issues. First off, as a parent, let's start with the parent. Many of us, over 70% of adults are going to struggle with imposter syndrome themselves. As a mother, am I being a good mother? If anybody else knew how dirty the laundry was right now, would I still get the accolades of being a good mom? So we struggle with it as parents. And then we're trying to parent our kids through it. And there are kind of two things that parents can do that are problematic. One is being super harshly critical of your children. That really isn't going to go anywhere fast. So to be overly harsh, to think you're just helping your kid by writing them really hard about stuff, that nothing, if they got a B, then why isn't it an A? If it's an A, why wasn't it high A? Like just driving them sometimes is one of the things that we hear from kids that are really struggling with imposter syndrome. Is like, nothing's really ever good enough that I do, and I have to be perfect. And I'm ashamed if I'm anything less than what I think somebody else expects me to be. Also, if you're a little too general with your praise, like, atta boy, atta girl, way to go you. I mean, it seems like that should be a good thing to say, but they didn't really know what they did well. They don't really know what you're praising them for. So labeling your praise, being very clear when you see your kid doing something, praising the effort that that's taking and being very specific about it. Think about being like a sports announcer at a basketball game where they're just describing what's happening. You be that sports announcer for your kid. Like you just describe that's what it's taking for them to get that point, right? And that you're focusing in on the process and you're giving them labeled support. That's really going to be some of the ways to maybe help your kid not struggle so with feeling like if they really were who they are, it wouldn't be good enough for you or wouldn't be good enough for everybody else. So those are a couple things as a psychologist that I would recommend. I'll let Sophia kick in too. I know we've kind of been talking.
Hi. Sorry about the lighting. It's become daytime here. I hope you can still see me. Black folks. It's a challenge sometimes. So yeah, basically, we were never really allowed to talk about our achievements as things that we had earned because everything else was a blessing. We were so fortunate to have been born in this country. You're so lucky that your parents are working so hard for you. You're so lucky you have everything you need to be successful. And you've been handed all of this. So why would you feel the need to talk about this like you're bragging about it? I know, especially for girls from Caribbean households, the expectations are incredibly different. Like my brothers and my older brothers were allowed to go out and do a lot more things that help them to feel empowered and more efficacious in their own successes in school and in life and in work. Whereas me wanting to be an explorer and go try different things and have jobs and play sports and stay out and do things with friends, that was not ladylike. So I think the opportunities were much more limited, and that caused a lot more friction as well. It also helped me to develop my character, though. If I didn't have those teenage experiences where I was trying to, I was taking an active role and forming my identity as a Haitian American girl, which was very different than my older siblings, then I wouldn't be who I am today and have experienced so many of the things that have helped to shape my character, my values, and the sense that I'm empowered to make things happen for myself, you know? So I think it's tricky, but I'm so glad that there's so many parents here because it's really an opportunity to teach your child how to responsibly manage testing out new experiences and giving them a safe space to come back to when it doesn't go as well as it might have, and helping them to suit up for the next challenge, right? So I think this is definitely something that is drummed into girls a little bit more, but because we're having these conversations, there are so many women who have shown us that with imposter syndrome, you can continue to use these as learning experiences and affirm yourself and be affirmed by others and just kind of craft your own way and find your way to your own authenticity.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Sophia. I just wanted to point out we're 4 minutes away from our end time. However, if you're willing to hang out with us, we have a few more questions in the chat, and none of us as panelists are in a rush. So we're happy to hang out with you for a few extra minutes to get your questions answered. So I just want to give you the opportunity to log out if you need to, but if you hang around, we're happy to have you. Okay, so an anonymous poster says, how do you overcome imposter syndrome when the DOJ, as well as Asian American groups, say Blacks with less qualifications are taking the place of more qualified Asians and whites?
Well, we see that happening with this lawsuit at Yale, right? Where you've got, challenges to affirmative action. I think this is a very serious topic. It's my understanding. I think there's going to be some more conversation. I mean, this in and of itself could be its own webinar, right? Its own discussion. So here's the thing: we're working off of some stereotypes, right? Here's one way I can share with you just a way to think about it. If people have access to the chat room, why don't you go ahead and open up the chat room? If I were going to ask you, what is a green vegetable? Name a green vegetable and put it in the chat. If you can put it to the all, like everybody, then we can all see just one green vegetable. Yep, go ahead, just throw up any green vegetable. Anyone? Mm-hmm. All right, if you're looking at this chat stream, you'll see that there are going to be some that are pretty consistent. Keep going, green vegetable. But you'll start seeing some people will go back to their heritage and start talking about different kinds of greens. People will start talking about, you've got celery, green, look, okra, right? Do you see, if you just had to come up with a list of green vegetables, keep going, everybody, I love this. If you had to come up with green vegetables by yourself, could you have come up with this list in the past 10 seconds? No. You need people that have all, look at these tomatillos. I love this. You have such diversity in experience that when you come together to come up with a list of green vegetables, look how much power you have. This is what happens in a classroom when there's diversity in the classroom and we talk about an issue. We are talking bok choy, snap peas, broccoli. We have that richness. We can solve problems better, more effectively, more efficiently, more forward thinking. So it's not just about getting a bunch of people that have high test scores. We need to get rid of this. Test scores are what somehow are some litmus tests to the value that you are in a classroom. If you get nothing else from this, I mean, there's been so much great knowledge that that everybody's shared so far, but just remember this list of green vegetables and know that your voice is needed in that classroom to share what green vegetable is something that you can contribute to the conversation, because it might be the difference between having what you think everybody has, and all of a sudden people are like, I don't know that vegetable. How do you cook with it? What do you do with it? And just think about how much power you add to the classroom. So I really categorically challenge this idea that you can't have, or that you must have the highest test scores and that's what's going to make the most vibrant classroom. Speaking as a college professor, that does not lend to an exciting conversation or rich problem solving or deep critical thinking, which are the kinds of things that we want for college students to be gaining from their experience, right? So, keep thinking. My green vegetable needs a voice. And, granted, you want to be you want to match at the kind of schools that's where you'll be able to thrive, where you'll be happy. So you don't want to shoot real, off. Whether it's too low for you or whether it might be just not really a good academic fit for you. You're looking for the academic fit that's right for you, the social fit that's right for you. And your green vegetable voice needs to be there. So like this whole, the Asian people have higher scores, this has a higher score, white people are taking my spot. I'm like, then we're all going to sit around and talk broccoli, and that's going to be one hell of a boring conversation. We're not going to go anywhere but be chasing our tails.
I do. So KCW posted a comment in the chat. He works they work in the field of EEO. Recent Yale case is more political than accurate. And I think that's also another thing to take into consideration. When you have some of these headlines, check the stats. Everything that you read is not real. Fake news is a total thing. And please,
Absolutely.
not allow fake news. Don't internalize fake news that's not actually relevant to you and allow that to diminish your self-perception and how you see yourself in the field, because 9 times out of 10 you're looking at some of these things and you're more than qualified and it's a headline. Folks will do anything for a headline, and how many times do we read super misleading headlines, then you get into the article and that ain't even what it's talking about.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just gotta roll an eye and be like, what's that meme, Smokey from Friday? Come on, y'all, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes. Go on now. Yeah. Since Sophia has now found some beautiful lighting, I think this next question will be great for her. So this is posted by an anonymous attendee. Can you also speak to the singling out of African Americans as the only ones who benefit from affirmative action alone, and not speaking to women and other minorities?
Yeah, this is a heavy one. So it's super interesting because yesterday at 4 a.m. my time, 4 p.m. your time, I was on someone's podcast and I was with another a career consultant and coach. And strangely, we had met in New York City years ago. She looked familiar, but I didn't connect that till later when we were on LinkedIn together. But anyhow, she's from the UK and she's of Jamaican descent. And I'm from New York and I'm of Haitian descent, right? And we were talking about the constant singling out of African Americans as receiving these handouts and not being qualified to be anywhere. And it really, both of our minds. And if you do just a little bit of scratching, a little bit of digging, just boils down to the fact that if all of us collectively on the continent from the diaspora were to actually be allowed to thrive, it would be really, really problematic for the systems and the constructs that exist. So the systems that are designed are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're keeping us thinking that we are different from one another, that we, as Black Americans, are not very connected to the home continent, to people in the UK, to elsewhere. And since the beginning of history, like people don't learn about the Haitian Independence Revolution, all these things are designed to keep us in our place, right? So by shifting the conversation from about to about African Americans, it keeps it very much an isolated thing, such as, like, for example, there's women on that list, right? But the women rights struggle and the feminist struggle is not something that white and Black women are necessarily united on either. It becomes a very separate fight. So people have been benefiting from our labors and our being put out there at the forefront in terms of protest and gaining rights and revolution and rights through revolution. However, there's no acknowledgement, and I think it's just for the reasons that you have, that I've previously mentioned. And I'll flip to Kayla or to Dr. Diane to add to that.
No, well said. Well said. I mean, I think, you know, we are very competent, and in our competency, we're very threatening, because we have so much potential as a Black community. One of the things, if you haven't had a chance yet to come to Washington, D.C. and go to the African American Museum of History and Culture, that is a moment for, if you possibly can, or go on a virtual tour, for you to see, you know, they have the lowest level in the basement is where they really talk about slavery and the slave trade. And it's meant to feel cramped and dark, and the ceilings are low. And then on top of it is built floor after floor after floor of what we have contributed to this country. It is breathtaking, and it is humbling. And you realize, you know, that's with, you know, two hands tied behind our backs, that we've been able to achieve as much as we have. And so I just think that there is definite reason for people in power to be frightened of the raw potential that is in each one of you sitting, listening to this right now. And so it behooves them for you to doubt yourself. It behooves them for them to give you and to tell you these things and whisper in your ear, or keep you out of the history book, to keep you doubting yourself. Because if you don't doubt yourself, then you truly can be your authentic self and be incredibly powerful in your sphere of influence. So, you know, I hope you're hearing from everybody on the panel today just how much we believe in you, that you absolutely belong wherever you are. Your voice will matter. Your test scores are not a measure of who you are. Sometimes your grades are not a good measure of who you are based on the school you've been in and the kinds of teachers you've had to deal with. It's your work ethic. It's your perseverance. It's your dedication and determination. And it's being kind to yourself and allowing yourself to make mistakes. You're more than belong here. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do.
I just wanted to add one thing. Having lived and worked internationally for over 6 years now and traveled to like 30 something countries, something else that has come up, which was really salient for me, was that no, we do not live in a post-racial society. There's anti-Blackness in every country, and there's discrimination in every country. However, you can see through media and being on the ground here and getting to know people from all over the world who travel through or who are expats and decided to make other countries their home, you are fully acknowledged as being the backbone of America. Like somebody said to me, American culture is Black American culture. Like there's no America without your contributions. So just because of like what Diane said, they're whispering in your ear back there, the world knows it. They're listening to our music. They want their rhythm and not our blues. I know you love that quote, Ashley, but yes, everybody around the world is very, very, very cognizant of what you have contributed and what you will continue to contribute to the building of America. Now, there are definitely some very real hurdles in place, but that's why we're here, and we're here to continue to find better ways to navigate. And I'm really thankful for these forums because they changed the game significantly, right? You know what I mean? And that's what we're here for. We're using our experiences to further empower you, and you'll go and do the same with your peers. Not all of them are here, but y'all have learned something today too. And there's peer coaching. Y'all got to hold each other down because we can't all be everywhere at once.
And really, like, if you look at the people on this panel, sometimes it just means you need to be in common company and you build up and you affirm each other, or simply being in each other's presence. I don't think that we as a panel, I don't think we've had the opportunity to really like dive in and pour into each other, but simply existing in this space with other dope Black women is enough of affirmation to be like, wow, I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm grateful for it, and I'm gonna take advantage of the opportunity. We're gonna do some great stuff in the process. So we're remembering to have that community, to have the folks that when all else fails and you're just having one of those days, you fall back on that community that's going to affirm you in ways that maybe you can't always confirm. Or affirm yourself. We all know the good old, sometimes you have to encourage yourself. Yeah, we know that sometimes it's you, but having buffers and having a community that, hey, I just don't have it inside me today. I need a word. Who's your village, and who is your community that continues to affirm you?
That was a great segue to the next question, also posted anonymously. And I'm very sure, knowing this group of women, that these answers will be lively. How have you become comfortable in being your authentic self? How have you moved past what others think, especially in regards to your qualifications?
I think it's not an end place. I think it's a place, it's very active and it's very vibrant. And sometimes you feel really like I'm in my zone. And then sometimes you don't quite feel like you're there. And I think it's a process. And I think all of us, at various different points in times, will struggle. I saw at one point in the chat room, someone was mentioning they were in their 50s, welcome to my world, and still struggling. And I think, it's a process, because as you shift through life and you go through different stages, there are different challenges that you're facing. And each of those challenges may be fraught with, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be capable enough to be successful with this new challenge that I'm facing? So I don't think there's a point where you're just like, I'm done. But I think you get more in that place as you talk about it, and you start learning who it is that you're trying to please, and that you're working on that internal narrative, and recognizing that that's the most important thing, is to give yourself permission to learn, and to give yourself permission not to be perfect. Perfection is a nice shield, but it also keeps people from really seeing you. And so you have to decide, at what point are you going to let the shield down because you're okay and you're safe and you're protected. I also don't want it to be so, kind of Pollyanna, to think that it's always safe for you to do so. Because especially in the racially charged environment that we're in right now, sometimes your best bet to stay alive is to be able to put that white mask on and make other people feel comfortable if you're going to get out of there alive. So we have to be really careful. I don't want to just say you can just be your authentic self in all contexts and that's going to be ideal. I think we have to be really careful that there are some contexts where we still cannot be our authentic selves and be safe. And I hate that that's the case, and I hate that I have to raise my child in 2020 to think that way, but we do. And we have the dead children to show for it. And so I think we still need to keep fighting, and I think we still need to recognize that this is a lot of internal work that can be done in safe places. And I hope, as Kayla was saying, that you find your people, you create your village where you can take your bra off and be you. And then there are other times where you're going to need to suit up and stay safe.
I also think that authenticity and comfort are not mutually exclusive, in that a lot of times when you're working towards being comfortable being authentically yourself, the beginning of that is being uncomfortable being ourselves, because we live in a society that has forced us to be someone outside of who we actually are. And so the process of stepping into our authentic selves sometimes itself is weird and uncomfortable, and we're not quite sure how to navigate that, because this is okay, this is who I am, but it's not who society has allowed me to be. So how do I become comfortable in the authenticity of who I actually am as a person? And so they do not have to, they're not mutually exclusive. And I think that you make a great point in terms of the safety, Dr. Graves, knowing that it would be awesome to exist in a world where in every single space you are authentically yourself. But we know that that's not the case. And so having to pick and choose and determining when and where can I fully and authentically be myself, and in what spaces, in having to determine which hills are we going to die on. There are just some spaces where, you know what, it doesn't benefit me in the long run to attempt to take on the stress that comes as a result of being authentically myself, because if I'm authentically myself here, this is how folks may react. And then I'm bearing the brunt of people's reactions, people's perceptions, and people's thoughts about me. And sometimes we just don't want to bear that burden. So for this little 30-minute meeting, maybe it is a switch, right? But learning to love yourself and having, you'll hear me say it time and time again, having folks in your corner that are going to continue to affirm you. In this space here, it was my students. It was my high school and college students that were like, oh my gosh, Miss Kayla. They would hear me say something and they would chime into a conversation because they realized that I was not much different from them at all. And it was refreshing for them. So as they started getting more comfortable coming to me and sharing things with me and having even more authentic conversations, I am even further encouraged to continue being authentically myself because I see how it impacts those that matter the most. Who is our audience? Who benefits from us code switching and being inauthentic in spaces at the expense of who? A lot of times it tends to be our white colleagues, our white peers who are benefiting from our inauthenticity because they get to remain comfortable. But that happens at the expense of our peers and our colleagues of color who need to see someone being authentically themselves so that they can do the same. On the flip side, when we are authentically ourselves, that benefits our peers and colleagues and students of color because they get to see it. And it's not always at the expense of our white colleagues and peers. If anything, it's a further benefit to them once they realize that there's an acceptance that needs to take place for us to continue being authentically ourselves. And so we can't please everyone, as Dr. Graves was saying. So who are we working to impact in what spaces? And how can we use that knowledge in those decisions to kind of find a balance between being authentically ourselves, but still getting the work done?
So I just want to stamp what Kayla just shared with a very quick story. I promise it won't be long, but I worked at an independent and affluent school in Houston for 5 years. And I showed up as myself, and it cost me a great deal. And so it got to a point where I was doing what they asked me to do, meaning administrators would ask me how the Black students felt about XYZ, or ask me as a Black faculty member, what can we do to blah, 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 right? Well, when I began answering those questions authentically, I became that angry Black woman, right? I became maligned. I was pushed to the side. I was cast out, and 100% did what they asked me to do. So what I learned in that moment is I am unable, and this is another thing, know yourself and know your capacity. I'm unable to water down certain parts of myself. And because I knew who I am in my wholeness wasn't okay there, I had to choose to move on. And it was a hurtful experience because I loved the students. I had colleagues who I loved. And again, being somewhere 5 years is no short amount of time. But I was in the ER for high blood pressure at the height of all of this. And I said to myself then, not today, Satan. And one thing about this generation is choice. You know, our ancestors, our parents, generations before us have worked tirelessly so that we would have options. I had the option to choose to leave, and I had the option to find a place that was a better fit for me. And so students, I encourage you to exercise your choice. You have options. You choose a place, whether it's an HBCU, a PWI, whatever it is, you choose a place that is affirming. You choose a place where you can build community, and you choose a place that is happy to acknowledge the totality of who you are. That is my charge to all students listening. You add value. Remember that. Not just your tuition dollars, but who you are as a human adds value to those college campuses. So you don't let them forget that. The final question for the evening was posted by Annie, and she'd like to know if we have any other reading materials, podcasts, any recommendations for building internal intrinsic confidence.
So I've got a super quick answer to this one, and it's not a podcast and it's not reading material, but this is my go-to every time when you really can never go wrong with some Whitney Houston, I'm Every Woman. Sometimes I just have to put it on the radio and play it a couple of times until I feel it, and then I'm walking out of my car letting folks know that I'm every woman. Anything you need done, baby? I got it, okay? There are books and there are podcasts and all that good stuff. I want to be short with this one. I'm every woman, and it'll really get you.
I'm happy to get together a list of things. I don't know, would there be a way to post it anywhere?
What we can do is send it to the participants when we send the recording of the webinar. We can send that list as well. So if you send that to me, we can get it out.
Be happy to. That way people don't have to kind of frantically write and things, but I have a couple of good things that might be helpful. The other thing that's not always a bad thing is head over to YouTube. There's a bunch of really good TEDx talks and general talks about imposter syndrome. If you just put in imposter syndrome, they have, and look at the number of hits. Several have, a couple million hits, and they're pretty good to go over this phenomenon and to, keep thinking about what we've been sharing tonight. But I'll be happy to get a couple of other books and things that would be just specifically helpful. But there's some great podcasts out there, and there's some great other resources happy to share.
Thank you. Thank you. You have anything, Sophia?
Yeah, so one of my favorites right now is Lovey Ajayi Jones. She's got a couple of books and she's got a podcast, and her Instagram is very good. So that's something I'm appreciating. But I spend an inordinate amount of time on Facebook. But that's because I love my group so much, right? I love my Facebook groups. So one that I would really recommend to everybody is called Black on the Job. It's this powerful community of all Black folks supporting Black folks in their professional endeavors. It's a great place to be vulnerable, to use resources, to make your own career and educational moves. And it's just a super empowering space. Like, they're really doing big things in there. And there's like 50,000 people or something. It's amazing. Like, there's great news. There's stories of commiseration. I'm also in a group called Black Girls Healing. So it's people being very vulnerable about the experiences that they have on a day-to-day basis in relationships. There's so many different resources. Like Ashley mentioned, Therapy for Black Girls, that's another one. There's just really unique conversations happening, and these safe spaces are so important for me to know that I'm really not alone. Like, we come in so many shades with so many different backgrounds, from 18-year-olds in our groups to like 50-something-year-olds. We have so many stories that overlap and intersect, and I just am in love with these groups, and please utilize them. I know the kids like Instagram more these days, or Snapchat or TikTok, but Facebook groups are it, right? Behind closed doors, you can say what you want to say, and you can support other people. You go in those groups and they are hyping you up like no other. Like, they are really on your team, and you can just say, hey, I'm having a bad day. You get 150, like, girl, you got this. You're gonna make it. And it's just such an amazing experience, especially being really far away in another country where there's not that many Black people. These spaces are really important for me. Like, they give me life. So I'll wake up any time of the day for y'all. Middle of the night, anytime, I'll come and join you.
This really filled my love cup. It really did. I'm so grateful for everyone who attended, and of course, our phenomenal panelists. One thing I want to voice over, a few folks have asked about the recorded sessions. So the way it works, the email address you use to register for the webinar is the one we will send all correspondence to. So once we get the transcript from our conversation, which is usually around a day or so before we get that, once we get our transcript, Marie will upload and send to all of you, and we'll make sure we include Dr. Graves'
Hey, that's
recommendation.
from one doctor to another now.
Well, yes, okay, paging Dr. Graves. But yes, we will definitely make sure everyone gets all of that information. There's all kinds of love going on in the chat, so just know we don't consider ourselves experts in this topic at all. We're just women who've gone through it. And one piece of feedback that I've received directly and also in surveys is, where are the men on these panels, especially the Black men? They are coming. We're having 2 series. So we're rounding out this series now. Next week, we'll meet at the same time, and we'll talk about student activities and student life on college campuses for Black students. And so we'll take a month break after that, and then we come back full force, and we'll be talking about more interesting topics, and you will see more diversity on those panels. But I just have to plug Black women and say, we're the ones who show up and do the work, guys. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. So if you're still listening, apologies. We're just grateful for you. We really appreciate you guys spending your evenings with us, and we know this taps into family time. One more request before we hang up. For those who joined a little bit late, can the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves again, explain who you are, where you work, and how this topic touched you? Kayla, you want to go first?
Gotcha. Hi, friends. For those that joined late, my name is Kayla Stores. I currently serve as the Assistant Director for Diversity Enrichment Programs at the University of Oklahoma. It's my last week. I will transition into a role as the Director of Equity and Inclusion for Brebeuf Jesuit College Preparatory High School in Indianapolis. Yay for progression, yay for promotion. But I am... Impostership syndrome is important to me, or this is very relevant to the work that I do also, because not only have I experienced it as an underrepresented student navigating different spaces, I'm currently in a PhD program. Side note, I feel like I wanted to chime this in at some point, but a Black woman PhD program, like sometimes I feel like I could write a dissertation on how to finesse a dissertation. That's impostership syndrome, okay? But I serve a lot of students who experience these things, and it's just really awesome to be able to have these tools to share with them so that we can equip them with the skills necessary to manage and combat.
Sophia?
Hi, my name is Sophia Bazile. I'm the founding coach and consultant at Futures Literate Youth and Professionals. I service students to apply to international university destinations, as well as young professionals who are looking to make career transitions. And yeah, imposter syndrome is something that I'm familiar with, like everyone else in my work with students who are very ambitious and high achieving, yet they're doing the almost seemingly insurmountable task of getting full scholarships to different universities all around the world and really going very far out of their comfort zone. And although that they've been successful throughout their entire academic career, up to a certain point, new environments and new challenges will definitely dredge up these kinds of emotions. And I've experienced it myself personally and continue to navigate feelings like you have to be perfect and prove things in the different spaces you work, especially in university admissions consulting when you're on the independent side. I don't charge $500 an hour. Does that mean I don't think I'm worth it? No, I'm just being authentically me and doing this in the ways that are the most important to me. I'm not here to make millions off rich families. I'm here to help people who deserve to be in university get to those universities that are going to help them thrive, right? So it shows up in so many different ways. And I hope that although you did join late, you really did get some poignant recollections about our own experiences and our our ways in supporting students, and really just take home some things that you can immediately begin to implement, and how you understand this syndrome and how you navigate it in your own life. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. So yet again, it's just been my honor to be on this panel with Sophie and Kayla. I definitely think, this is a pretty amazing group of women who basically are just kind of meeting by doing these panels. And I think it's been a delightful journey thus far, and I look forward to many more in the future. So my name is Dr. Diane Graves. I'm a child clinical psychologist. I currently am at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. That's just north of Bethesda. I'm here as somebody who works with children clinically and families, but also just as somebody who has gone through going to a predominantly white institution as an undergrad, going to a highly competitive PhD program, and now being in academics and being on the other side of the podium in these college classrooms, and really trying to help Black students find their way to a solid fit for college. So I do run a summer camp. We did it virtually this year, which was great. It's a 3-day program to help students launch a very successful college search. Where is going to be the best place for you? So this is my area of research, and it's my area of passion. I just want the best for every one of you out there that are, actively finding your way.
Okay, we had another question about being able to share the recordings of previous series as well. For the folks who are still listening in, Accept has a YouTube channel where all of these are being uploaded, in addition to some other great webinar series. I was spending time while Dr. Graves was talking, I was spending time searching it because I wanted to drop it in the chat. I don't know how. If you go to YouTube and search Accept Group, then you'll find us and you'll be able to subscribe and access all of the webinars. I apologize for not being tech savvy in this virtual world we're living in. But that's it for us, folks. If you all are still hanging in there with us and you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. If not, we'll just hang out for a second, just to make sure we address anything that we need to. I see all the love and the shout outs in the chat. It's really appreciated. You guys are great, and you will have an opportunity to provide us some feedback. You will get a survey as well. And please be honest, we are not perfectionists here. We just want to get better and better and better while realizing that this topic is just very nuanced. So we want to be sure we're bringing you our best. All right, Excellence in College Admission Preparation Camp at myecamp.org. So if you guys didn't see that in the chat, check it out from Graves. That could be a great resource for students. Okay. Does anyone know, any panelists, do y'all know how to share a YouTube page, not just a particular video? Yeah, we're all old, so just search Accept Group. I guarantee you'll find it.
I can call my 15-year-old in. She could probably tell me how to do it.
Well, you know what I can do? I'll drop a link to one of the videos, and then you can see the page from there. So to the 39 folks still hanging in there, you're about to get a special treat. Are you? Let's see.
I actually think I just added the channel. The link that I posted in the chat, that may be the link to the YouTube channel.
Yes, do whatever Kayla just did. Oh, sorry about that. That was my volume. Okay, so yes, Kayla just did that. There is only the first week's webinar up now. We're still processing last week, but you'll be able to get started on this great series. And again, next week closes out this series, but we take a month break and then we're coming right back with another one. So it is 7:03. You all hung in with us an extra 33 minutes. We really appreciate you, and we hope to see you next week. Anything else, panelists?
Nope, just thank you. Good night,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you guys very
Thanks.
much.
Take care, everyone.
Everyone have a good night. Sophia, you have a good day. And we'll see y'all next Tuesday. Be blessed.